It's time to do some draft pick trading again. You may have seen my two-headed monster video the other night. We're here to talk about the two-headed monster, essentially trading up to the top 2 picks in the draft. Link in the description. And I've got a little surprise for you, the three-headed wide receiver monster, or the two-headed wide receiver monster. Basically doing what we did with the 1.1 and the 1.2, but doing it with wide receivers a little bit later or in the middle of the first round. Essentially trading for the 1.4, the 1.5, maybe the 1.6 or 7, or at least the 1.4 and 1.5, and going the number 1 and the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football, doing the two-headed wide receiver monster stack, baby. We're breaking down how to do this and a whole bunch more. The Fantasy Football Show
begins now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
My most requested videos are always draft pick trading. People love when we talk about draft pick trading, probably because I'm crazy when it comes to trading. I'm aggressive. I don't sit back and play it cool. I literally attack what I want, where I want, when I want, and I take destiny into my own hands. I don't like sitting back and letting somebody else take the best wide receiver, so I get the leftovers and let them decide for me. I like to make the decision. I like to attack players that I want. And the two-headed monster approach is amazing. I love it. But what about the wide receivers? You guys know I'm a big advocate of going wide receiver in round 1 in 2022. In fact, after the big 3 running backs, or maybe even the big 2, but we'll call the big 3 running backs, JT, Javonte, and Najee Harris. Those are my big 3 running backs. After all 3 are off the board, I'm literally wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Give me Kupp, give me Jamar, give me Jefferson. Put these 3 guys right in line, back to back to back, right after the top 3 running backs. Maybe even after the top 2 if you want. I could argue that. I could argue that Harris has a tough enough quarterback situation when compared to Javonte and JT that maybe we're worried about efficiency a little bit for them, but they are working on the offensive line. Maybe Trubisky's got what it takes. Who knows? Maybe they trade up and get a rookie on top of that. They use Trubisky as a bridge. Najee did a ton with a little last year. He already proved that he can get low yards per carry. It was like 3.9 a carry, but tons of volume, tons of touchdown potential, tons of PPR work. The only thing that frustrates me is that he's so overworked. He has to be overworked to get the yardage because he's averaging low yards per carry. The efficiency's low. Imagine if he averaged 4.5 yards a pop. Imagine if he got Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. Had Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson landed in Pittsburgh in an offseason trade, Najee Harris could be the number 1 overall consensus running back. Or at least he would partially share the 1.1 ADP with JT. He would have vaulted Javonte Williams if Javonte never got a quarterback and Pittsburgh got the quarterback. Situation can alter fantasy value that much. And let's say Wilson went to Denver like he did, and A-Rod got traded to Pittsburgh, which he didn't. But if that happened, then JT, Javonte, and Harris would all be like neck and neck 1.1. Arguably all sharing a little bit of the 1.1 ADP. So I'm not trying to say Harris with a quarterback would have been better than Javonte with a quarterback, but one of them getting a quarterback and Javonte got the quarterback does give that player an advantage in my opinion. So Javonte does move past Najee Harris, but you could argue Harris is a clear-cut number 3 overall player. I love it. But again, then it's Jefferson, Jamar, Chase, Cooper, Kupp, or Kupp, Chase, Jefferson. I don't really care the order. Those are the top 3 wide receivers. Then there's a tier break. So let's build the wide receiver, and potentially the wide receiver, all from first round draft slots that we're going to trade into. Now, it's very important. Rule number 1, just like with running backs, rule number 1 was you got to have the 1.2 or the 1.1 right out of the hat, right out of the gate. So you only have to maneuver into one of those top picks. So same thing here. If we want to go wide receiver, and we'll start off with the double wide in round 1, not the triple. Much easier to do the double wide. We're going to need that 1.4 or 1.5 or 1.6 right out of the gate. That way, we're only working on getting one other player or pick right there. So let's assume we got the 1.4 right from square one. Now we got to make a trade to get the 1.5. We don't need the 1.3 because traditionally people are going to go running back before they go wide receiver. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be running back with picks 1, 2, and 3 in any upcoming draft. So I think it's very safe to say if we get the 1.4 and 1.5 or 1.4 and 1.6, we're looking at 2 of the top wide receivers in fantasy football, 2 of the top 3 wide receivers in fantasy football. You're getting one of Kupp, Jefferson, and Jamar Chase if you have the 1.4 and the 1.5, or the 1.4, which you got from the start, and 1.6. If you've got 2 top 6 picks, you can get Kupp, Jefferson, or Chase, 2 of those guys, I firmly believe. And if not, you get a running back. If not, you back out of your plan and you go Najee Harris, big deal, or Javonte. Worst case scenario, you back out, you get Javonte and Jamar, or Jefferson and Javonte, or Cooper, Kupp, and Javonte. So don't worry about if it doesn't work. You're going to be fine on your alternative plan. It could end up being better. So our objective is to get the 1.5 or 1.6. So we have 2 picks inside the top 1 to 6 overall. Because you're not going after the 1.1 or 1.2 like in the running back two-headed monster example, you might be able to get away with giving your 3rd and 4th rounder. And this entire time I've been talking, this said 1.9, it should be 2.9. So let's say we get rid of the 2.9, okay? We're trying to go get the 1.5. So 2.9, and honestly, I would try and get rid of this 5th rounder if you can, but let's say we can't. Let's say we got to give the 4.9 up. Now we have the 1.5. We gave up the 2.9 and the 4.9 to get the 1.5. The key, like in the running back two-headed monster example where you acquire the 1.1 and 1.2, is to give up 2 for 1. You don't want to ask for another pick in return because it ruins the allure of making the trade to begin with. And sometimes you got 1 or 2 shots where somebody's vulnerable to hit the accept button and they regret it later. The best trade you can make is one that someone regrets right after because you obviously won the trade. And you want to make sure you keep that appeal of, I'm getting an extra pick. Maybe I got to hit this button before I consult with anybody. Boom. Maybe I shouldn't have did it. Oh no. So that's the whole goal, right? Okay, so let's put our voids in place. We have a void in the 2nd round. We have a void in round 4, but we don't really have 2 missing picks. We have our 2nd rounder up in the 1st round. So our only void so far where we don't have a draft selection is in round 4. So we could essentially roll with a team similar to this if we didn't trade any further. Cooper Kupp in this draft slot, this is 1.5, and we got Jamar Chase, let's say, at 1.6. In the 30s, you're looking at running backs like Elijah Mitchell. You're looking at players like potentially Fournette, Barkley. Let's go with Eli Mitchell at this pick. This would be the 3.4. This is actually the 1.4 and 1.5. I apologize for that. So 3.4 Mitchell, ETN with the other running back spot. And if this would especially work if there was no need for a second running back, like if this was a flex and you only required to start 1 running back, this approach works even more so. But you could still assemble 2 very good running back 1 and running back 2s in this situation because Mitchell could fall, ETN. If Mitchell didn't fall, there's a possibility you get Kenneth Walker, depending on where his situation is. Breece Hall will probably be gone, but you can maybe get a Breece Hall. But this kind of situation I'd love. You still get an A-Rod. You can still very much get a Dawson Knox. I really love the look of the squad. The question is, could we actually trade the 3.4 and get a wide receiver and not address running back? My guess is going to be no, based on the look of it. And this is the first time I've run through it, actually, thinking maybe we could go wide receiver, but I don't think the running back support would be there if we take away this 3.4 and the 5.4. We're not going to even have an ETN at that point. So I think if we made another move, we'll try it. It may not work. It may not be better than what we have right here. But let's try moving the 3.4 and 5.4 for another high pick, maybe in the 1st round, and see what a running back would look like. So if we trade the 3.4 and the 5.4, and let's say we get the 1.10, we don't have a pick until 6.9. We're creating a void in round 3, in round 5. Now our 1st rounder, we never touched it. It's at 1.4. Our 2nd rounder is actually at 1.5. Our 3rd rounder's at 1.10, essentially. So the first void actually isn't until round 4 and round 5, and only 2 draft slots are actually affected to move up all those picks. Who do we get at 1.10? Well, in the top 10, you're looking at, Javante's not going to fall. McCaffrey could be there. Mixon could be there. DeAndre Swift could be there. So if we took away this pick and this pick, we have to ask ourselves, is it better to have Mixon and not have the player we had here? Like, does that team look better than the team we just had? I'd say no. I'd say give me, even if we put in, unless we went like risky with Kamara and assumed that Kamara wouldn't miss any time, that could be an interesting look if you wanted to take a big gamble on Kamara and he falls. He does fall there. That could be interesting. But you might even get away with that as the third rounder or move the third rounder up. I'd rather have ETN personally and Mitchell. I think this particular approach, I like better doing just the one move. I don't know if the wide receiver, or wide receiver running back in round one is better than when you were going two-headed monster than three-headed monster with the running back scenario. I tend to think we should backtrack, give this 1.10 back, get our third rounder back, get our fifth rounder back. We'll put the third rounder back. We'll put the fifth rounder back. This is the better approach. Have one void in round 4. Again, our third rounder is where it is. Our second rounder's just moved up. We've only lost the 4th round pick here. And in doing so, losing the 4th round pick, we have upgraded into 2 top 3 wide receivers for 2022. And I love it. I love the look of this squad, especially if I can land like Kenneth Walker in there, or if you can get a better player than ETN here. I absolutely love it. You also could potentially say, I'm going to use this pick right here on Herbert. So if you want to go with the top quarterback in fantasy football, in my opinion, for 2022, and then use the pick where you were going to get ETN on Herbert, and the pick you were going to get here, you grab the other player. Let's say running back wise, this lands you a Michael Carter. Like, that is a good look too, to get Herbert as the top quarterback in fantasy football. You still got a top 10 running back there. You got a sneaky top 10, top 12 running back, and then you got 2 of the top, potentially the number 1 and the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy football. Like, that's a good look too. Now, one thing I want to do is backtrack even further and go back to the beginning and remember when I kind of hesitated on what if we could get rid of the 3rd and 5th rounder to get a first rounder. And you're not going to land this even half the time. You might not get it even 1 time out of 10. You might have to make like 20 offers to land something that great. I can't stand when people come back to me and say, Smitty, what you told me doesn't work. People don't trade my league. And I'm like, Bob, how many times did you offer? How many offers did you send out? They're like, well, 2. You're not going to land an unlikely trade not sending out trade offers in masses. Think about it. You send out, it's all about volume. You send out 12 offers. All it takes is 1 accept. And think about it from your perspective. Have you ever hit accept on a trade that you regretted literally the minute after you hit the button? All you have to do is catch a person in a vulnerable state, which isn't going to happen every time. Sometimes it's the moment they read the email, they're in the wrong state of mind about that player, whatever. They're busy, they're in a rush, they're by themselves, they don't have their mind right. If you don't offer a ton of trade offers and try and get lucky, you're never going to win a trade by a mile. So I don't want to hear that it's impossible to trade a 3rd and a 5th rounder to get a bottom of the 1st type of draft selection. You can do it. You just got to be willing to wait. You got to be willing to throw 10 offers out. They all get rejected. Throw another 10 out. Add a round 8 pick, which I have 9.9 here. It's 8.9. So I'll put 8.9 there. Add the 8th rounder. Send 10 more out where you add another pick. We'll take this away for the moment. We'll put our number 2 round pick back, or 4th round pick. Okay, now we're back to square one. We haven't made a trade. We got the 1.4, we have the 2.9, the 3.4, the 4.9, and so on. We haven't made a single trade yet. Instead of giving up the 2nd and 4th for that 1.5 or whatever, what if we tried to get the 1.7 might land you that wide receiver we're talking about. You could still get Jefferson and Jamar Chase potentially doing this, pushing it a little bit. But, I don't know that 3 wide receivers are going in the top 7. You might even be able to get one of them at 1.8. So let's make it 1.8 so that we have people in the comments a little less antsy about telling me that you can't do this in your league. No one's going to do that. I do it all the time. It just takes hard work and a lot of offers. So we acquire the 1.8. We give up our 3 We give up our 4, we create a void in round 3, we create a void in round 4. Essentially, we don't. Our second's in the second, our first is in the first. Our third rounder's actually at 1.8 now, and we only sacrificed our 4th round pick. And again, maybe you got to throw in the 8.9. Let's just do it and get it out of the way. Now we can assemble a little bit better of a team. Now we've got Jamar Chase at the 1.4. The 1.8, we take Justin Jefferson. And again, we now have the 2.9. And at this draft selection, we're potentially looking at a DeAndre Swift, an AJ Brown, a CD Lamb, a Josh Allen. Let's plug in an AJ Brown and just see how this looks. AJ Brown, and our next pick is 5.4. So let's say we end up with an ETN, Carter at running back. We got our 3 wide receivers, and we got an A-Rod, and then you get Freiermuth or whoever. That's a pretty solid team. But if we didn't go wide receiver with the AJ Brown pick, let's say we went running back, and let's say potentially Swift was there, then that's an amazing little look that you got there. You could go with ETN here. You could go with potentially Judy, because this was, what pick was this again? This was a 5.4. I mean, Judy could fall to 5.4. He might not, but that would be a really, really solid squad. If Swift's not there, maybe at that 2.9, you get Breece Hall, or you get Kenneth Walker. You still get ETN later. All possible. That 2.9 could be very, very valuable, and it could be far different in terms of what you're able to build. And then if you make that move, you get the 2.9. Now you can afford to do a second trade. Before, it was not wise because you gave up your second and your 4th, and then you got running back depth that you're worried about. But now we could essentially trade our 5.4 and our 6.9 to acquire, let's say we get a 3.4. So now we move that void over here because we're going to get a 3.4. We create a new void here at round 6. We create a new void here at round 8, or we had that void already. So our first rounder is in round 1 where it belongs. Our 1.8, you could say, is our second round pick. Our third rounder is now at 2.9. Our 4th rounder is now at 3.4. Our first void, because we have 4 picks in the first 4 rounds, is 5. Then we have 6 and we have 8. They gave up 3, 4, 8, and 5 and 6. So we never gave up our second rounder. Again, this is a much harder approach to pull off because of that first trade being so difficult. But once you do it, you can trade a 5 and a 6 for a 3.4. That one's not hard. The 3.4, 4.9, and 8.9 for a 1.8, that's the hard one. But it just takes that one person that absolutely loves depth. Give me 8 Chase Edmonds. Yes, I love my depth, baby. It takes that one guy in your league, and every league has a guy like that that's willing to stockpile depth. And don't say it can't happen. You all know you've been sitting there before an email comes in or a notification on your phone that a trade went down, and you're like, oh my God, why did he make that trade? I wish I would have known that he was giving away that draft pick. I would have traded for it. That happens all the time. In this scenario, we got the 1.4 Jamar Chase, the 1.8 Justin Jefferson, the 2.9, we're going to say it's Breece Hall. Now we got the 3.4. So we'll take ETN out, we'll take Judy out. We got the 1.4, the 1.8, the 3. What was it? 3.4. So now we got Chase at 1.4, Jefferson 1.8, Breece Hall at 2.9, and now we've got like a 3.4 to play with. We could go potentially with a Josh Allen or Herbert there and go with that approach, and then just go light at these positions. Or if we take a running back at 3.4, I mean, we're talking about players like Aaron Jones, maybe still Eli Mitchell, like we talked about earlier. That would be a phenomenal start. Hall, Mitchell, Chase, Jefferson, a little different than that ETN in place of Hall, and then having more firepower. If not Mitchell, maybe you go Waddle. Maybe you go very light at this running back 2 spot, and you stack those wide receivers, and you pull off this nice little 3-headed monster maneuver right here between Chase, Jefferson, Waddle, and still getting Breece Hall. I'm merely here to tell you that you can do things like this, creative things like this, and have a freaking amazing squad doing draft pick trading, doing 2-headed and 3-headed monster type approaches, whether it's wide receiver driven or running back driven. I'll have more on draft pick trading. You can bet on it coming up here in the coming weeks. I appreciate every one of you watching. Get on over to sleeperu.com if you haven't already. Get a lifetime membership to my content and get 2 years of text advice on me. One-on-one text advice with your man Smitty if you buy my top level lifetime membership, and never pay for content again. Get rankings, bold predictions for life by getting my top level lifetime membership. Where do you go?
Want bold year-round rankings, trade calculators, and bold predictions? Get on over to sleeperu.com.
And also don't forget to get on over to Underdog Fantasy, and you can get a free 10-minute phone call with me. Save it for before your draft, the night before your draft, or use it right now. But go to Underdog Fantasy using the link that I have at smitty1.com. The banner pops right up. Click it, click on Underdog Fantasy, or use promo code Smitty. But it's easier to just go to the link. $10 minimum, and you get a free phone call with me, and you get to use it and play DFS or props or a best ball draft. Make sure you're subscribed if you're new to the channel. Hit that thumbs up.
Hit that subscribe button if you're new, and wipe your feet at the door.
I will see you all later. Spread the word. Tell your grandma. Do it.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.